My fiance tried to make me sign a contract for 40 of my income because she plans on being a stay-at-home mom the night before our wedding. I signed it, then read it out loud at the altar and left her. I was supposed to get married last week, but unfortunately it didn't happen. I pulled off a pretty gutsy stunt in front of all my friends and family, and now my ex-fiance's family and my own family are both extremely upset with me. For context, my fiancé Chelsea 26 and I 20 had been together for the past 3 years. We met through friends, and even though we knew that we were very different from each other, we hit it off. After dating for a year, she moved in with me. Things were getting serious, and eventually we had a talk about our future. We decided that we were sure about each other, agreed that we wanted to marry and start a family before 30. She also made it known to me that after having kids, she didn't want to work anymore and wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I was completely fine with that because I work in a tech company and make good money, so I believed I would be able to support my family. Chelsea was not going to quit her job until we had our first kid, so I assumed that since she would be working until then, we would have saved enough money together. This is why I don't understand why she came up with some stupid contract that she wanted me to sign. It stated that I would give up 40 of my income every month and transfer it to her account to secure her future. As if the contract wasn't bad enough, it was the sneaky way she had been about everything that really ticked me off. I had proposed to her almost 10 months ago, so she had almost a year to tell me about her plans. We could have discussed this. I could have spoken to her and we could have come to a common ground, but instead she tried to deceive me the day before the wedding. My mother-in-law, Donna, decided to visit me in the evening with the contract. After she showed me the legal document and explained it all, I couldn't believe it. I thought Donna was trying to pull a fast one on me. Donna and I went to her room to settle this, and that's when Chelsea told me that this had actually been her idea. My world came crashing down around me. She said she had been thinking about this for a couple of months leading up to the wedding, and because it was sensitive, she couldn't think of an appropriate way to bring it up. But now, apparently, before committing to the wedding, I was obviously very upset. I tried to reason with her, because it was literally the day before the wedding, and I couldn't think of any other way to deal with the situation. I told her that 40 of my income is a lot of money, and since she wouldn't be quitting her job until she had her first child, I couldn't understand why she needed this so quickly. I also couldn't understand why she had drawn up legal paperwork for something like this because it just made me feel like she didn't trust me. We had an argument. She told me that I was reading too much into this, and I was upset with her because she had been very sneaky about it all. After a while, she put her foot down and told me that she wasn't getting married if I didn't sign the contract. That was it. In the heat of the moment, I decided to put on an act. I smiled and signed the contract, then went back to my room without another word. But I was obviously not done with it. I was hurt and felt betrayed, so I decided I was going to address it at the wedding in front of everyone. I don't know if it was right or wrong, but I just wanted to humiliate Chelsea and her mother because I was incredibly disappointed with both of them. The next day, everything went smoothly up until the point she said her vows and I was supposed to say mine. Instead, I brought out the contract from my pocket and read it out loud to everyone publicly. Obviously, everyone was very confused, and I could see Chelsea turning red in the face, but I didn't stop. I went on to explain the contract to everyone and told them that the wedding was no longer happening because Chelsea didn't trust me. After what had happened the previous evening, I didn't trust her either. She had chosen to be sneaky and tried to trick me into committing to something like this instead of having a normal discussion and coming to a mutual agreement after almost 3 years together. If we couldn't even trust each other, there was no point in getting married and ruining each other's lives. After that, I tore up the contract into as many pieces as I could and walked out of the venue without even looking back. I got into my car and since I had already packed my bags and put them in my trunk, all I had to do was drive for a while and find a different hotel. That's where I've been staying since. Both our families lost their minds after my stunt at the wedding. Apparently, the situation after I walked out had been chaotic because Chelsea broke down into tears. Her family tried to comfort her, and my family did damage control with the guests. Once most of the guests had left, our families had a long discussion and agreed that what I did was completely unnecessary. Even if I didn't want to marry Chelsea after finding out about the contract, I could have just told her about it and avoided all the drama. They said that the fact I had a chance to sleep on it and still chose to humiliate Chelsea publicly made me worse than Chelsea. At least what she did only hurt me, but what I did hurt Chelsea, her family, and even my family. Now they want me to issue a public apology for my behavior and tell people that I've been going through a lot mentally, which is why I did what I did. I don't think that's fair, though. I haven't been going through a lot mentally. I just thought that what Chelsea and her mother had tried to do was disgusting, and I didn't like it. Yes, I'll admit what I did was dramatic and theatrical, but I can't say it was an overreaction. I think she totally deserved it, and I really don't understand why my family thinks I ruined their reputation, or why they think they have one to ruin in the first place. As far as I know, we are really not that important. People will gossip about this for a few days and then forget about it. But at least I'll have the satisfaction of knowing that I got back at someone who tried to screw me over for the rest of my life. If not that, at least I'll have a cool story to tell. But the truth is, I didn't do it for either of those reasons. I did it because I was very upset that almost 3 years of my life had been completely wasted with Chelsea. And honestly, I do want to get married and start a family. Now I'm going to have to start all over again with somebody else, and I don't even know if it will be the same. I'm also upset about a lot of other things because I really love Chelsea. And I still have a soft corner for her, which is why I'm even rethinking what I did. Anyway, since almost a week has passed since the incident, I've started to have second thoughts, but I still don't feel too inclined to publicly apologize to anyone. I don't think I should have to apologize for humbling my ex-fiancé, her family, and even my family at a wedding that never happened. And just to be clear, I don't have a problem with the fact that she was demanding money for her future. I had mentioned in the beginning that she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom after having kids, and I was completely fine with it. In fact, even if she had come up with a prenup or something, I would have been fine with that too. All I had wanted was an honest and upfront discussion about all this. It's not like we've never spoken about finances. We've been together for 3 years, and I've lived with her for two. Of course, we discussed finances and had always had clear communication about these things. I really can't understand why she couldn't feel comfortable enough to bring it up with me earlier. I'm not mad about the fact that she demanded a part of my salary for herself, but the fact that she wanted me to start sending her money right after we got married didn't sit right with me. As far as I was concerned, I had believed that she would only quit her job after we had kids. For now, we could have stuck to what we had been doing for the past 2 years. It's been about 4 months since the wedding fiasco, and I've come a long way from where I was that day. I still can't believe everything went down the way it did. That night after I walked out, I was in shock. It felt like my world had been flipped upside down, like the life I'd imagined with Chelsea had been yanked away in one brutal moment. The first few weeks after the wedding were nothing short of chaos. There were constant messages and calls from Chelsea's family, trying to fix things, and every time I looked at my phone it felt like I was staring at a mirror that reflected my worst mistakes. I had no idea how to navigate all of it, and to be honest, I didn't want to. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to stick with my decision. Sure, I had humiliated Chelsea and everyone else at the wedding, but that feeling of betrayal, of being tricked, was too strong to ignore. I had given up my trust in her, and walking out had been the only way to take control back. In the aftermath, I had to figure out where I stood with my own family. They weren't exactly thrilled with me either. At first, my parents were upset with me too. They were concerned about the reputation of our family, the drama I'd caused. For them, the shame was unbearable, and they pushed me to apologize publicly. I was torn. The guilt from the aftermath was eating me up, but I still didn't think I was wrong. It wasn't about the money or the contract itself. It was about the lack of trust and the manipulation. The fact that Chelsea had planned this behind my back, trying to pull a fast one on me, felt like a deep. I couldn't shake that feeling, and the more time passed, the more I realized that my decision had been the right one, even if it was messy. A couple of weeks after the incident, I had a long heart-to-heart with my parents. That conversation was what really shifted things. After they saw how emotionally wrecked I was, how devastated I felt, they started to understand why I had acted the way I did. I wasn't some cold-hearted person who humiliated her on purpose. I was hurt. And when you're hurt, sometimes you do things you regret. But for me, it wasn't about the act itself. It was about standing up for myself, for not letting someone manipulate me into something I didn't want to do. When they saw that, they backed off. They apologized for pushing me to apologize to Chelsea's family. It was a relief. I felt like I had my parents back on my side. Round that time, I decided to make a big change. I quit my job at the tech company. It had been weighing on me for a while, but the wedding incident was the final push I needed. I had always felt like I wanted to do something more with my life. I wanted to start something of my own. So, with a mix of excitement and anxiety, I jumped into the unknown. I started laying the foundation for a new business. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined. The idea of being my own boss, calling my own shots, it felt like a fresh start. Things started moving faster than I expected. My dad, who has always been my rock, was incredibly supportive. He helped me with advice, connections, and guidance. Our relationship, we started working together on my business plan, bouncing ideas off one another, and it felt like I was finally on the right path. The first few weeks were rough. I spent long hours at my computer learning about running a business, putting together plans, and making connections. There were days when I felt completely lost, unsure of whether I was making the right choices. But then there were days when everything clicked. I'd get a call from a potential client, or I'd see progress on something I'd been working on for weeks. It was small victories, but they mattered. At the same time, I found myself trying to move forward emotionally. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about Chelsea from time to time. I tried not to, but it was hard to ignore 3 years of memories. Sometimes I still catch myself wondering if I did the right thing. I'm not sure if I'll ever get a solid answer, but I know that the relationship I had with her wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't just about trust, it was about being honest with each other and communicating. Chelsea had failed on both counts, and I couldn't ignore that. I didn't expect her to reach out after the wedding. After all, I walked away from everything. But when she did, after weeks of silence, I didn't know how to feel. I'll admit, hearing her voice made me feel something. I don't know if it was relief or just the years of memories flooding back, but I was caught off guard. She apologized, but I was still too angry to fully process it. I didn't know what I wanted from her: closure, answers, an apology of my own, but the conversation felt unfinished. I guess I expected something more from her. Maybe we could have talked about what happened, but in that moment I didn't have it in me. As time went on, I focused more on my business and less on the past. My friends were supportive, and they didn't judge me for what happened with Chelsea. In fact, they were proud of me for standing my ground. I didn't need anyone's approval, but hearing that from them helped me feel like I wasn't alone. I also realized that I had a lot of growing to do. The person I was before the wedding, before everything fell apart, The experience forced me to reevaluate my priorities and who I wanted to be moving forward. I was no longer the person who would let someone manipulate me or make decisions for me. I was learning to trust my instincts even when they were telling me things I didn't want to hear. The last few months have been a blur of change, but they've also been a period of growth. I've been focusing on my business, spending time with people who genuinely care about me, and slowly rebuilding my life. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in a while I'm starting to feel hopeful again. As for Chelsea and her family, they've faded into the background. They haven't contacted me in a while, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I don't have any ill will toward them, but I also don't need them in my life. What happened was a betrayal, and I don't think I'll ever fully get over it, but I'm moving on. I'm not going to let that one chapter define me. It's strange to think that, just a few months ago, I was standing at an altar about to marry someone I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. But now I'm standing on my own, building something from the ground up. I guess sometimes the hardest moments in life lead to the biggest changes. And while the road ahead is still uncertain, at least I'm walking it with my head held high. I don't know if I'll ever find someone like Chelsea again, but I'm okay with that. I'm finding my own path now, and that's enough for me. The months following that chaotic wedding day continued to unfold in a whirlwind. The air felt heavy with the weight of unresolved emotions, but there was a sense of liberation too. It was strange finding myself in a world where I had no clear roadmap, but there was a quiet peace in that uncertainty, an understanding that I was finally free to carve out a future that was truly mine, one where I wasn't shackled to someone else's idea of who I should be. The days blurred into weeks, and slowly I started to find a rhythm. I settled into my new routine. My days were filled with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and the hum of my laptop as I pieced together what was once a far-fetched dream. It was daunting at first. There were times I felt like I was spinning my wheels, unsure if any of it would come to fruition. But there were also those moments, the quiet victories that kept me going. The small victories I'd once taken for granted now seemed monumental. I sent off my first official pitch to a potential client, and when they responded with interest, I remember sitting there in disbelief. It was a tiny step. It was around that time that I realized just how much of my life had been tied to that toxic idea of perfection I'd built with Chelsea. We talked about a future together, about how everything was going to be perfect, how we'd be the couple everyone admired. But in hindsight, it felt like we were both so focused on the idea of an idealized life. We were stuck in an image, and that image was fragile, built on a foundation of assumptions and expectations that I had never fully questioned. I'd believed in the fairy tale, but the moment that fairy tale unraveled, I was left holding the pieces. The worst part was that I didn't even know who I was without it. I started reflecting more on who I was before Chelsea, before the wedding. The person who I had put on the back burner for years, a person who had dreams and aspirations, but had been so willing to put them aside for the sake of a relationship that wasn't what I thought it was. That realization wasn't easy. It was like staring into a mirror and seeing a face I hadn't recognized for a long time. But it was also freeing. The person I was before, the person who had confidence in himself and didn't let others dictate his choices, he was still in there. I had just lost him for a while. I started doing things for myself. I booked trips I'd been putting off, reconnected with old friends, and even joined a local community group to get involved in something bigger than myself. It was almost like relearning how to live. For so long I'd let my relationship with Chelsea define me, let it dictate my choices, my happiness, even my friendships. But now it was about rediscovering my own voice, my own path. Some of my old friends reached out. At first I didn't know what to say to them. It felt like everything had changed, and I was suddenly a stranger in my own life. But the more I spoke to them, the more I realized that my decisions hadn't come out of nowhere. They were a response to years of uncertainty, to feeling like I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep everyone else happy. They understood, even if they didn't fully agree with what I'd done. What mattered, though, was that they didn't judge me. They supported me in ways that I hadn't even expected. Some of them even admitted that they had always felt uneasy about how I'd allowed Chelsea's family to have so much influence in my life. It was reassuring in a way. It reminded me that I hadn't been completely blind to the situation. I just hadn't known how to trust my own instincts until it was too late. As the months went on, the idea of business ownership became more and more of a reality. I secured a few small contracts, which was a huge win for me. But the real challenge came when it was time to hire my first employee. The thought of being responsible for someone else's livelihood was daunting. I remember spending hours researching, reading, reaching out to mentors. The pressure was immense, and there were days when I seriously questioned if I was capable. But I had made a promise to myself to build something that wasn't just about surviving, but thriving. And for the first time, I truly believed I could do it. The first employee I hired was a young woman named Sarah. She had a background in marketing, and after a few interviews, I felt confident she was the right fit. It was strange, though, being the one in charge. The dynamic had shifted from the person who had been part of a team to the one making the decisions, calling the shots. I was suddenly on the other side of things, and it was a position I was still learning to navigate. But Sarah was eager, hardworking, and willing to adapt to the fast-paced environment I was trying to build. We clicked instantly, and her energy became contagious. It was humbling to see someone else believe in what I was doing, to see someone else excited about the same vision I had for the business. Meanwhile, there were moments when my past with Chelsea crept back into my thoughts. A song I used to play when we were driving to one of our countless weekend getaways. A place we'd frequented together. A familiar smell or the sudden reminder of a shared joke. It would hit me like a wave, and for a second I would find myself paralyzed in that space between the past and present, questioning everything again. But then I would remind myself of where I was, of how far I had come since that day. It was around that time that I started thinking about dating again. It wasn't something I was actively seeking, but there were moments when the loneliness would catch me off guard. It wasn't about wanting to replace Chelsea. I wasn't looking for someone to fill the void. It was more about the idea that I was ready to connect with someone on my own terms, without the baggage of past expectations. I had no idea what that would look like, but I was open to it. I had spent so much of my life in relationships that were based on other people's needs that I had forgotten how to prioritize my own. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was learning to be okay with the idea of being single for as long as it took to find someone who genuinely aligned with my own values. One afternoon, while I was sitting in the office with Sarah going over a new campaign strategy, I got a message that I didn't expect. It was from Chelsea. At first I hesitated. I had moved on so much since the wedding day, and I wasn't sure what this message would bring. I had told myself that I was done with that chapter, that I didn't need closure or any kind of reconciliation. But there it was, her name flashing on my screen. She wanted to meet. I didn't know why, but I knew I had to think this one through. Part of me was curious to see what she had to say, to understand if she had truly changed, or if this was just another attempt at manipulating me. But the other part of me was content. I had come so far without her. Did I really need to open that door again? I sat with it for a few days. I wasn't going to make a rash decision. I had to be sure I was doing this for the right reasons, not for closure, but for my own peace of mind. I was stronger now, and I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. In the end, I decided to meet her. But I wasn't going to go into that meeting with the same person I was when we first met. I was someone different now, someone who had learned to stand up for himself and trust his own judgment. And whatever happened in that meeting, I knew I would be okay.